Hello, welcome to the Green Hub YouTube page. My name is Tone and I'm the co-founder of the Green Hub project for teens. We are a charity in Surrey that supports young people who go through a difficult time, struggle or have anxiety, and we offer therapeutic gardening sessions. But we also offer support for parents, and that's called the Parent Hub. And the Parent Hub is a group that meets once a month, and it's all free. But parents can come together and they can listen, they can learn, and they can also support each other. And there's always a therapist there who will facilitate the session. And I'm really, really excited because with us today we have Karin Backa-Sigrell, and you're also my mum. And you are a clinical psychologist, and you're also a psychotherapist and a psychoanalyst, but you've also worked with families for over 5 decades.
Yeah. I actually started my career in a child psychiatric clinic in Stockholm, and I worked there full time for 20 years, and that I've been working. Then I've been in private practice after that. And when you work with children, you work with the whole family. You also work individually, so you kind of work with everybody. And I've been doing lots of also child psychotherapy, psychoanalysis. I've even had parents groups. I've been supervising a psychologist working with infants. So there's a big span. And after my retirement, I've been working mostly with couples and with families, sometimes 3 generations, sometimes siblings. And that with a co-therapist. So we've been 2, a male and a female psychotherapist working together. We are not doing that anymore, so I'm kind of stepping down due to my age, but still having a little bit of clinical work. So, Tone, you have questions for me?
I have a lot of questions for you. So we're going to do a couple of scenarios where we want to kind of have a discussion. And I know that my mom and I we talked about this before, and she already made me aware that she's going to contradict things that I believe in or biases that I have. And the whole idea is to make people kind of think a little bit about the family from a different perspective. Family dynamics is really powerful. So the first case we're going to talk about is the family where you have mom and dad and they have 3 teenagers, and they have not been getting on very well. So they've been arguing for a couple of years, and there's been really a lot of tension in the family, a lot of difficulties. And eventually they decide to separate, and the 3 teenagers then face themselves in this position where they have to go between mom and dad. And the way it works in England is quite different from Sweden, because in Sweden you go week on with one parent and week on with another parent. Here it seems to be one parent takes more responsibility, and the teens are with them longer. The children then go between, and the parents are still fighting even if they're separated. And the teens are really struggling with the shift in between. Is this a scenario that you see a lot?
Yes. If we think of having the teen in focus, they don't want their parents to continue fighting. They want to be able to see each parents and have a good time with them and not hear the parents complaining about the other parents. And there is an idea that even divorced parents should have the same rules. And I think, well, they have divorced because they can't get along and they probably don't love each other anymore. So how on earth can they come to an agreement? Let's face it, idealistically they may be able to do it, but most often they're not able to do it. So I always say, well, at the mother's house, there are certain rules. And of course, a teenager can adjust to that. And the rules will be completely different at the father's house. It is so much better to accept that. To think that divorced parents can agree on rules when they couldn't agree when they were married, that's very seldom it happens. And it relieves the parents trying to find that they will agree because they won't. And it relieves the teenager. Is that?
That's very, very interesting, because I think so many families, you will always have the parents going, well, why does my ex not follow these guidelines or these rules or boundaries? And there's still lots of argument even though they're divorced. And they say that the children are affected by going from living in one way to another. But actually, you're saying that you have separated for a reason.
Even small children can adjust to that.
Yeah.
I have to go to bed at 8 at my mother's. I can stay up until I am tired,
Yeah, exactly. And
I think in society there are different rules.
yes. And often when you have a couple and one doesn't want to change and doesn't want to talk about it, whether they're together or not, and the other one wants to talk about it, and gets so frustrated that the other half or the other ex doesn't want to communicate. What do you say about that?
Well, if there's one thing that is almost impossible, it's to change somebody else. So I always say, you can, if you really want to make a change, see what you can change within yourself. Don't try to change your partner. You're not going to succeed. Of course, you can talk about difference. You can talk what you want with your partner. But you have to accept that we are so different. We have such different characters, strengths and weaknesses. And of course you can. But the other one has to be willing to do that.
And something that people talk about a lot now is boundaries. So in a childhood, in a family, and a family construct, and you have the teenagers, and then you have the parents, and they talk about that they don't have boundaries or they have boundaries. And the boundaries could be about bedtime, about when they come home at night, or what they can and can't do, and so on. What are your thoughts after 5 decades of working about boundaries?
I think probably one of the major things I've been working with, and let's take a family that lives together. And I don't think that parents understand what strength it is if they can agree on some boundaries. This idea about children living their lives and finding themselves. Well, to do that, you have to have certain things that you kind of work against and that you practice your nose against.
So it's a wall, like a...
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important that there will be a certain nose. And it has to be. You don't let your child cross the street with traffic. You are absolutely certain this is a no. And there might be having certain time to go to bed, or it might be, I don't know, whatever that is disturbing a family. If you can agree that is a no, the two of you, it really leaves the child. And in my way of looking at it, I think that if you always think, oh, if I just nag enough, if I just, make enough trouble, they will give in. Well, the child keeps going and trying and trying, using all energy of moving that boundary. But if there is a boundary, the child will know, it's not worth it. I'm not going to win. And this is life too, isn't it? But there's something else that's happening. In the inner world, you know that if you're always nagging, if you're always pressing the limits, you don't feel very loved, actually. You think you're kind of a troublesome child. And So your anxiety increases. If
You
you
worry.
that you really have to have certain no's. And I don't know what no's you had for your children.
Oh, we were very, very clear about bedtime.
Okay, so bedtime is something.
Mm.
And bedtime, but you really have to take time with your husband or your wife to decide how you're going to do it. To agree on certain things and not to give in. It will take a while, but they will get the message. There's no question about that. Two parents agreeing on something very, very strong.
So you're in essence saying that, so you choose your battles, that you've always said that.
Oh, absolutely.
But when a child knows the limitations of how far they can go, this way and that way, it gives them a sense of security. You think you're kind if you let the child not have that, but you're actually kinder if you give them that sort of boundary or that sort of sense of here but no longer. And then they can bounce off those walls, and that's how they grow, but they also get a sense of stability.
I bet you I've worked with thousands of families where one child is really deciding what the whole family should do. Like some of them does not want to go on vacation or go in their car when they want to go somewhere, and makes it terrible for everybody in the family. That child is not loved.
Can you explain what that means? That child is not loved. How?
Because it disturbs the whole family, everybody. We can't even make it to the airport because he doesn't want to go in the car right now, or he doesn't want to do that right now. So it won't be a nice atmosphere in that family because he will always say no.
And then they rule for everybody.
Yes. And the minute the parents decide on something to stop, and the child knows that, it really changes.
So you notice that when they stop putting boundaries in?
Oh yes. So I think it's very dangerous if you don't have it.
Yeah, because I think the child, would it be fair to say that the child thinks that they can do anything they have power to do? They almost become omnipotent. And
that's kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to stop me. So I don't think you should have to say no like that or be very authoritarian in that way. But there should be certain no's.
So the other scenario that I thought about, that these are all just generic scenarios really, but that's the family where the parents are together. And again, just for argument's sake, we'll say mother, father, but it could be mother, father, father, of course. And they have 2 children. They are teenagers. They've generally bumbled along all right. There's been no major crisis and so on. But one of the teenagers has an incident that happens at school, and it could be bullying. And the boy feels that he can't really talk about it. He's a bit embarrassed that he feels the way he feels. And that will then make him lose his appetite. He gets more short-tempered, more grumpy. It will affect his sleep. And he becomes very difficult to be with at home. Mom and dad sees this child completely changing in front of their eyes. And it goes on, and he eventually doesn't want to go to school anymore because the thought of going to school and having this incident again is too terrifying. And this is what we see a lot of actually within the Green Hub when there's been an incident with bullying, and it's very common. But eventually the parents find out what's going on and what's happened, and they want to do everything they can. But then you have the 2 parents. One wants to talk about it and wants to talk to the partner about it, get help. And the father finds it harder to talk about it, still equally worried. And so we have the 2 parents starting to friction against each other because they're really worried, but they don't know how to communicate. What would you do to support parents?
Well, this is obviously very, very, very difficult. First of all, I would really think of how can the parents support each other? I mean, one talks, the other one doesn't talk, but of course they're both very, very worried.
Yeah.
It's very hard. Sometimes it's very hard to get the teenager to go and talk to somebody. But perhaps the parents could, because they do need help.
Mm.
They do need, I think sometimes they need somebody, a third person that could help them.
Mm.
Put more questions into what's happening. Asking them what they have tried, or what they, to see the strength that they do have. And the most important thing is they do feel support with each other, because very, very often it's traumatic for the parents as well. So they start to blame the other parent, and that's definitely not what parents need right then.
Mm.
They need to be helping each other.
So potentially finding a family therapist or a couples therapist to talk about this.
Yeah.
And if you listen to this, who's perhaps the one who doesn't want to talk, would you say it's worth going out of their comfort zone to try and do this on behalf of their child?
The one who doesn't talk will come along.
Mm.
I mean, the important thing is not to blame.
Yeah.
The important thing is to find a way.
Yeah.
And to find that way is not easy.
Mm.
And of course you need to talk. You need someone to help you.
And it's a journey, isn't it?
Oh yes, yes.
Thank you so much. The other thing I just wanted to talk to you about is that, in the world now, and in the UK alone, there are many young people who are in the bedrooms. Because they're unable to go to school anymore, they're so anxious about it. It's become very, very scary for them. And so they are staying at home and either being home educated or waiting to find a way to be home educated. And I'm wondering about what are your thoughts with regards to being isolated in the room and away from the family and the construct of the family, and even doing things like eating with the family or helping the family with chores?
As a therapist, you don't have all the questions, that's for sure. What I'm thinking is that if you think of your teenager being isolated, a teenager's thoughts will be thinking the same thing, and they get stuck in their thoughts. Of course they need input. Try to put a little pressure on them. At least we do want you to eat with us, or at least we want you to take a walk around the house. I don't know what. But not giving in to, or they can't do it today. Not to give in too easily.
Because I'm worrying that parents, in this generation of parents, because I don't think we had the same issue 30 years ago, are worried about pushing the children when they have anxiety, that they worry that that's going to be, something's going to happen to them. So a little bit of
trying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just have this philosophy that we're human beings, and we really need to be in connections with other people. And when you're taken out of even the household, then you're not part of something like a machinery that works. And so if you don't even have chores, you even have roles within your family, then you have no purpose. So being able to be brought into the family and have roles, because even if you have mental health, you can wash up, you can take the bins out, you can lay the table, but that is, you have a role, then you have a purpose and a meaning.
But talking general about it is very difficult, because it will be so many levels.
Yeah.
And but not to give in easily and say that's the best. They don't feel like it today. At least try.
And one thing that we found with the Green Hub, with our sessions in the garden, is that once they come to the garden, and it's either the garden we have at Laxyard or the garden we have at Haydens, and the one we have at Haydens are for teenagers who are unable to attend school for emotional reasons. They come out and they're in nature, in fresh air, and they're in the green, and they are in a small group of individuals. And the 2.5 years that we're doing this, watching the teenagers walk in and then walk out, the change in their posture, their alignment, the way they look, everything changes.
Yes, because what they experience in their room. And many teenagers also change, day and night. So you have to also try to make limits to that. the time of being a teenager is a crisis time.
It's hard anyway, so
Yes.
you're already going through neurologically in the brain changes.
Yeah.
So I have one more question to ask you, and that is, when I grew up and I would talk to you about psychotherapy and family dynamics, you often use the word the black sheep of the family. And it was often in the construct of that you have a family and you have a teenager who was kind of going down the line of being self-destructive in one way or another. And you used to say that that child is taking on the energy of the others in the family. Could you explain a bit about that? Because that's family dynamics at a core.
There are many ways of putting it, but you could say one child is offering himself or herself. There might be other problems in the family that you don't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
One parent might be drinking, might be a financial crisis, it might be psychological problems, really, and things that are not talked about or things that are quite down.
Yeah, so being suppressed.
Yeah,
perhaps.
and so one starts to make trouble. So our focus will be on that child.
Mm-hmm.
You see that quite often.
And then they don't know what they're doing, do they? So,
No.
But they
Of course
sort of take on
Yeah.
that. So in a family therapy, you would unravel this, would you?
Yes, and you would say that one child is carrying the symptoms for the problems in the family.
Mm. And then there's always the child that isn't in a crisis, the teenager, the child that is perhaps towing the line or whatever, but they're often being left behind. What can happen to them in a family where one is really struggling and in a crisis, and then there's the other child?
Well, I think it's quite obvious when you're listening to your question that, of course, that child needs to be seen.
Yeah.
I think,
Mm.
and also have attention.
Yeah, and they can break down too, but sometimes they don't because they don't want to put more burden on the parents.
Well, having teenagers is quite a job.
Yes.
And
It's hard to be a
there's
parent.
nothing called perfect parents or somebody who's really succeeding. I think it's life with teenagers putting everybody into out of their equilibrium. Yeah.
I almost wish that we could say that, we're growing with our children. So, instead of saying that we have to be this, we have to be that as a parent, we are growing as a parent with teenage children, or, so we're all growing together as a family construct, however it is.
It's the best lesson in life to have children.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Karin and Mum, I want to thank you for your time today. It's been an absolute honour to interview you, and thank you for sharing your wisdom, and I hope that this has been given some ideas and thoughts and just some reflections about the difficulties of being a family, and also family with teenagers, and also when you struggle. And do look up the Green Hub if you get time, and if you're interested in joining the Green Hub in any way for your teen or for the parents, then do come along and find us. Thank you.